Good evening, everyone. How is everybody doing today? I am Shelly and Dunkley. Thank you for joining us for Green Your Biz today. This is the launch. Welcome. This is an open space. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions. We will try to answer as many as possible tonight. Before we start, let me introduce you to Live Echo and Green Your Biz. So Live Echo, where Echo, ECCO, stands for Environmentally Conscious Consumer Operations. It is an online resource and consumer guide, your way of going green. It makes going green easy and fun for you. That is also very important. Um, Everybody thinks that going green is really hard, it's difficult, and it's really costly, but it doesn't actually have to be. There are various ways that you can tweak it for it to make sense to you, and it will then become seamless. So that is ECO, Live Echo. Green Your Biz. Recently, we've had calls as it relates to reimagining capitalism and creating more economic solutions with the play on the three letters ECO. We thought it was an opportune time to relaunch Green Your Biz, which we shorten and we just say GYB, as a consultancy and online web series for business professionals to make sustainability a part of their business strategies. That's something that we need to see now more than ever. Post COVID, what was happening before, and we need to now look at what steps we need to take to now go green, and be green and sustainable in our businesses. The web series is a monthly chat hosted every last Wednesday of the month. And you can reach us via email. Please sign up. If you can, go to our website, www.liveecco.com/GYB and register. That way you'll be able to get tips sent directly to you. You'll also be able to access our network of sustainability and environmental professionals, and ask whatever questions you might have. We will be able to assist you as best as possible. Our invited guests are experts in their field and will provide you with practical information on how effective sustainability strategies can lead to cost savings for businesses and industry. We also highlight the opportunities for integrating corporate social responsibility into your business strategies. That is also very important for businesses now. Like I said, remember to sign up for the web series. We will be sharing tips and additional guidance following every episode. So, tonight we begin the first of many discussions focused on creating sustainable business strategies within any size organization. Let's consider, should we be re-evaluating or reinventing current policies, supply chains, investment opportunities, and business models? That's something that we should actually question. Is that something that we should be doing now post-COVID? The pandemic has brought into focus many vulnerabilities within businesses, supply chains, or health system, and every other institution. Globally, it has underscored the interconnectedness of our natural, social, and economic systems, while providing a stark reminder of the scale of weaknesses which have accumulated over time. Jamaica is not short of these inadequacies. This platform is an avenue for us to engage in these types of conversations. Let's lead the change that we want to see. And from there, we are then able to shape a more resilient and sustainable Jamaica, Caribbean region, and of course, world. So let's chat. All right. We have two guests with us today. Um, I am going to check that they're both here. Yes, they are here. So let me do my introductions. I will first start with Karen McDonald Gale. She's an environmental professional. Mrs. McDonald Gale possesses a Master of Science degree in Environmental Impact Assessments and Auditing from the University of East Anglia in Norwich, and has lectured at the University of the West Indies on that topic. She has over 20 years of experience in the Jamaican and Caribbean environmental field, which has given her vast experience in both public sector policy development as well as civil society dialogue and participation. Karen is currently Conservation Finance Program Manager for the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. She has worked on community environmental management throughout Jamaica, including as the Chief Executive Officer of Jamaica's largest NGO grant-making institution, the EFJ, Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, and has proudly served on the board of directors of the Natural History Society of Jamaica, the Jamaica Environment Trust, Campton College Alumni Association, and Jamaicans for Justice. Mrs. McDonald Gill is also a founding member of the JIEP, Jamaica Institute of Environmental Professionals, and has served as council member, treasurer, vice president, and president over the years. Karen, we welcome you to our chat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And you?
I am well, thanks for asking. Let me now introduce Richard May. He is a sustainability strategist. In the early part of his career, he was involved heavily in developing the quality department of SGS Jamaica, where it confirmed to him his absolute love for the field of standards development and systems implementation. He then moved to Sandals Resort International as the group director, responsible for developing the corporate sustainability program, which further confirmed his mission. Today, he is steadfast in his mission of corporate sustainability. He continues to pursue and earn international personal accreditation in various fields related to guidance in developing and implementing risk, energy, and sustainability programs, so his clients are always on the cutting edge. Through his consultancy company, ECCOS, ECHOS, he has completed work with Sandals Resort government agencies in Antigua and Barbuda and Jamaica, and for regional organizations like PAHO, IDB, EarthCheck, and an extended list of private sector clients internationally. Richard May is an individual member of the Association of Energy Engineers and is a certified energy manager. Now we shall welcome Richard.
Hey.
Good day.
Hello.
How is everybody doing today?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm here. Let's have a chat about this wonderful topic that we're also committed to.
Yes. Let us
good.
jump right into it. Firstly, Karen, let's start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do and your association with JIEP and what they actually do?
Sure. So, first on my side, I think I'm here more for my studies more than what I do today. Today, I still do grant making, and I've been working, as you heard, with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, which is setting up national conservation trust funds, a lot like the EFJ, for those of you who have heard of it, across the region. So that's been my focus. But my studies were on environmental management systems, and that really is what I hope to go back to someday, and what I wanted to talk more about, because as you said, I hear a lot of barriers being put up about EMS, environmental management systems, and the exact design of EMSs were meant to be a process of really making something that can work for anybody, any type of business. So I will say more about that when we get into that discussion. Okay. The Jamaica Institute of Environmental Professionals is one of my many passions. As you heard, I do NGO service wherever I can. And in 2000, we're now 20 years old this year. I worked with a group of environmental consultants to start this group, which was really meant to begin discussing, are we doing all we can in terms of environmental best practices, and in particular, use of environmental science in our case. And so it started with a very lovely debate about what is an environmentalist versus an environmental professional versus an environmental advocate. And I'm sure that's a whole topic on its own. But what we aim to do is really talk about using science to make sound decisions on environmental management. And I'm happy to say more as the time allows.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Richard, your turn now. Let's have a chat. Tell us a little about what you do and ECCO.
Okay. ECCOS, first of all, is an acronym outlining the core services of the company, focusing on energy efficiency, climate change and conservation, health, organizational efficiency and practices, and safety and sustainability. ECCOs.
Okay.
We focus on getting our clients past the hurdle of how do we tie science, the science of environment and sustainability, to our business operations. And so we work
Mm.
a lot with persons like Karen and the scientists to get businesses to understand that it's not rocket science. If you try to do it on your own, yes, you may find hurdles and potholes that you didn't have a clue about. But if you work alongside somebody who knows what they're doing, then getting your energy under control, getting your community commitments, whether you're adopting schools or you're having outreach programs or you're dealing with things like deforestation, beach cleanups, these kind of things that actually have a real impact on the environment and on the sustainability of your business, become easier. And so we work with companies to put processes in place so it also doesn't become a one-time, one-off thing that you do, to get an accreditation or so people can see you, but it becomes a part of your organization's DNA. It's now how you run your organization.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people get caught up with sustainability and think it's just green or it's just social management. It's not. It's in the simplest sense
Mhm.
of the word sustainability. It's how are you going to get your business to be here tomorrow without sacrificing the environment and the people who are sacrificing themselves to work for you. That's it. All right. So
Yeah.
we'll get into more of it, but essentially we work with companies to develop sustainability programs. Right.
Okay.
So,
All right. So first question, kind of sort of. How can sustainability and environmental professionals help businesses and their business interests? Karen, let's start with you as an environmental professional.
Well, I think Richard started to answer already. I think it's a balance between those who know the science of it
Mm-hmm.
with those who know the business of it. And one of the hardest dialogues we have as scientists is making it relevant to the businesses. I remember when you sent out the discussion and notes and you had a discussion of the negative effect on the environment, and I made sure to change it to say this isn't about what's negative. This is just about what we should be doing. It's really this discussion beyond why we should do it. We should be beyond the discussion of why environment is important. I hope we are. And it really is making it worthwhile for the businesses. As Richard will tell you, and I'll leave him to tell you more, we start simple. We really start with, as he said, energy, waste management, things that you're doing already,
mm-hmm.
and how you can just think about those things. As we always say in a household setting, the same goes for a business setting, and which is why it's relevant to any type of business. Whether you're totally paper-based or you are doing a bigger manufacturing operation. The idea is for you to think about what your impact is on the environment and how you can minimize it. And in most cases, minimizing it leads to cost savings.
Okay.
Which is
All
what
right,
your
Richard.
financial controller wants to hear, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I think most people want to hear how do I save a book. So Richard, for
Exactly.
you as a sustainability professional, how then
Mm-hmm.
can you help businesses? I guess it ties into what Karen just said.
It ties very much into what Karen says because we can always come up with a list of things that speak to how you can save money, but there comes a point where that list is finite, and you have to look beyond saving money today to looking at how you're gonna prevent damage tomorrow, and that damage can be again in the environment. It can be perception. It can be the social fabric of the communities in which you operate. So when we look at an organization to help them with a sustainability platform, it really is a matter of taking that operation apart and going, okay, what are your goals for your organization? What are your goals with energy? And how does
Mm-hmm.
energy tie back to climate change, air pollution? And most companies will tell you, oh, but I'm using electricity. It doesn't have an impact. Well, yeah, you use electricity at your location. Somebody has to generate it using diesel oil, and that diesel oil generates carbon
Right.
dioxide and methane and other oxides, which then leads to climate, climate warming, global warming, and so on. Um, our responsibility or our focus is to try and bridge the information Karen and her team will give you in terms of what's going on with the environment, where do we need to focus, what are our critical issues at this point. This year, it's deforestation because we're having a lot of floods and we're having it. Next year, it may be looking at social development. 2 years ago, it may have been waste management, depending on what the region, the country, the area has to focus on to keep us all healthy, safe, and so on. So the focus of a sustainability consultant in putting creating business sustainability is multi pronged, and it really requires going through and doing an assessment or audit, if you wish, and then prioritizing where you can actually make positive impacts.
Mm-hmm.
And we try our very best to steer away from do this and you save $10, because after a while the $10 is gone, and people get steered into the direction of only doing things that save money. We find and have found over 20 plus years in the industry or in the business that much of the or many of the things that actually save you money long term actually don't come with an upfront financial saving.
Okay.
It's a lot of changing mindset, changing perceptions, getting staff and customers to operate differently, and that leads down the
Yes.
road to you having massive cost savings and so on and so forth. So
Okay.
we'll get into it later on, but
Yeah.
that's sort of the basis of how we operate, what we try to
I
Okay.
do.
want to just to
Go
jump
ahead.
in and just give you a very quick idea of some of the members of JIP, just because I think it's relevant.
Yeah, yeah.
We would have regulatory agencies and their persons, in particular, a NEPA, Water Resources Authority, hydrologists, hydrogeologists, all the scientists you can think of. Richard is a member, and and the teams and the environmental consultants who do EIAs, auditing, etc.
Very much so.
And as he mentioned, the academic side of things, the people who do the modeling, coastal modeling, climate change modeling, all those kinds of things. So it really is the science side of what's happening with the environment that we have focused on, and we have a wide range of members to be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, in general, both professions have to work together, because you are looking as an environmental
We do,
professional, you're
we
looking
do.
at how business or how human behavior, human interaction impacts the environment. And then Richard now will talk about the money side of things, how to save us
Correct.
money to some extent.
Yes, we do the translation
Translation.
for the client, and in many ways, without the science, you don't have. It's kind of like the scenario we're having now with COVID. If you don't have the science, you really don't know what to focus on and when to focus on. Right? So it is definitely a hand-holding, handshaking scenario where we need the scientists as much as the businesses need the financial savings that they chase.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's move on. What do businesses need to think about in terms of their environmental impact? And I want us not just to look at Jamaica, but the global context and the regional context. What is happening in the Caribbean? Let's talk about the impact of businesses. Karen.
It's probably good that I go first. I think the part of what you said is actually the hardest discussion to have with a business and a businessman. He doesn't care much past his bottom line. So to ask him about SDGs or climate change or NDCs or any of the other acronyms that we all know well too well, is not as much relevance to him. We really have to translate it back to the role he plays. And indeed, the global discussion has moved solely from environment to the new environment and social safeguards, and the overall concept that this is much more, again, of just what can I do, or what is the problem I'm having, to how can I be a better citizen of a space that you're in. So it's harder. That's the challenge in terms of getting the businesses involved. As I mentioned before, the easy part is really honing in on what the operations is, and I think this is what Richard and sustainability professionals like him do, which is to go specifically to the business you're at and talk to them about their business and their
Yeah.
operations, and then make that relevant to them in terms of environmental management. The really easy ones are all in his name: energy, waste,
Yeah.
energy, waste, and electricity. All those kinds of things are the very easy ones. With water, to find cost savings. But
Okay.
and then you move from there. And when they see the value of it, you can have the further discussion. Somewhere down the line, I look back to, we will have to talk about how much is for certification and all those kinds of things, and how much is for yourself, and how much is for your parent company if you're related to a parent company. We certainly found that having a parent, internationally based parent company, pushes a business along.
Yeah.
And we have to ask the question as to why that is. Why a Jamaican-based industry wouldn't want to just say, I'm doing the right thing. It really has often been driven by international standards, or, and I'll be frank, I'm in the grant-making side of things, or international money. Businesses will tell me, if you give me the money, I'll do it. And if you don't give me, I won't do it. And that's a question we have to answer. Why, as Jamaican businesses, we don't want to do it just because it might save us some money. And the last point, which I know Richard can tell you more about, is the upfront. So solar is a good example. Solar is expensive upfront. And until we figure out how we incentivize it, and we've done it for solar, and we now have to do it for the other industries, to say it's worth it to go into solar upfront, even though the upfront cost is higher. It's worth it because long term we can see the savings.
I believe we have Jason Robinson in the chat. He's from Solar Buzz, so he definitely knows a little something about solar and what he encounters in terms of talking to business persons about switching out. All right, so Richard, from your angle now, what is the environmental impact, and how do we talk to businesses about making the change to sustainable business practices? You were smiling earlier, so I thought Karen hit the nail on the head for you.
Karen hit the nail on the head. Going to businesses and telling them, you need to work towards SDG number 7. Have clean energy goals. You're gonna get crickets in your background and eyes looking like, okay. But speaking to your business owner about the low-hanging fruits, changing your lights to LEDs, getting more energy efficient air conditioning units. It's the tangible things, or the semi-tangible or quasi-tangible stuff, that you have to move with first, because environment and sustainability they are buzzwords, but they're not ingrained in our natural day-to-day living. So when you bring it into a business context, I mean, if you look at what you're taught in school, for business development, you're taught economics and finance, and you're taught about operations management and strategic development and so on. And very rarely, unless you choose, do you see or hear anything of environmental sustainability or environmental management. So when you get into companies that have been operating 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and you start telling them, oh, we need to go green, or we need to have environmental management programs, you're going to get questions like, why?
Why?
We've been doing this for 25 years and we didn't have environmental program. You want us to save energy? No problem. Show me how much we're going to save and we'll do it. You have to get that first step, the water saving, the energy saving, and so on. But in doing it, you also have to tie it back to climate change, to the impact on not having Monadam run down by May every year. And that kind of stuff. And you have to get the PR people involved. You have to get the marketing people involved. But the mindset you need to change starts with the GM, the financial controller, the accounting people, and your general operations team. When you get them to understand that, hold on, if I change the light bulb and I save the money, I'm also reducing my carbon footprint. Then you'll get the question is, what is that carbon footprint? How did I get one to begin with? And you start getting them to understand environmental impacts of their actions and the wider reach of sustainability. And then you start having them looking at staff improvement programs and so on and so forth. It is a step-by-step process. It is not one of those, I'm going to implement a sustainability program and I jump up tomorrow morning and do it. You will in every company that we've worked with. You run into hurdles, you get pushed back because people just don't understand what you're trying to do. So
But
the
is it that we also need to, sorry to cut you, Richard, but do we need to do more? I don't want to say necessarily marketing behind it, but promote the fact that these things are beneficial not just to your business, but to the environment. And how do we expect to run our business without a healthy environment? Stop smiling.
yeah, you see,
Richard is over there like, I've
you're
heard
trying to
something
put me
like
in
this.
trouble. All right,
No,
let
because
me.
we need to reach out to them, not just in our dollars and cents, but in our dollars and cents and the environment. If we
Yeah,
don't have a healthy environment, we don't have a business.
that's a fact. But here is where I'm gonna throw you a curveball that is making a C or a U. How many companies, if you survey today and ask them, where do you plan to be in 5 years, 10 years? What do you plan to be pushing? How many of them you think will have a legitimate, solid answer for you? If
Not
they
that many.
can't answer you about where they're going to be in 5, 10 years, there's no thought of real
Yeah,
sustainable business. So getting them to think sustainably, climate change, deforestation, social development, and so on, when they don't have a plan, they hope to be here in 5 years, but they don't
yeah,
have a plan to be here in 5 years. You're going to run into, you're going to push them into waters they don't want to swim in, and that I believe is one of the biggest mistakes we have in selling or pushing sustainability as a topic, as a concept, as a strategy for growing and maintaining business. All right. Once we get people to a place where, or companies to a place where they genuinely think about how they plan to be here in 5 years, then you can tie for them the fact that, well, if you plan to be here doing this in 5 years, you're gonna have to help us save the beaches and
yeah,
put back on the garbage that keeps getting dumped in the gullies, and we need to save the staff and so on and so forth. Um, so that they understand. I mean, Kingston is the first city expected to undergo climate departure. Many companies don't even understand what that means,
yeah, yeah,
right? Of all the places in the world, we are the one, Kingston, as a city, is the first one that's expected to hit a temperature zone that it cannot recover from. I don't think we actually understand that yet.
yeah.
Get up and we quarrel every day. Boy, the place hot. And my light bill is $60,000 or $400,000 because we have to run the AC. Why though? How did we get here? What are we going to do to actually reverse this or prevent this?
Hmm.
I mean, outside of just complaining that we have this problem.
Yeah.
So it's those
And
things.
I see Jason has a question about policy change as well. We can't deny that there is a level of enforcement that would help if it were more stringently enforced. The some of the policies are there. Some of them are by design voluntary,
Hmm.
and and we know that they are. And I think the leadership at both levels in an organization, if the head of
Mhm.
the organization is the one saying we need to get this done, somehow magically it happens, and they
Yeah.
bring Richard in and they have a nice conversation and create the green team, which is in the end that green team is your core. It doesn't have to be huge and it doesn't have to be earth shattering. In fact, one of the very early discussions is what can we do without any first cost. And
Yeah.
you'll be amazed at what you come up with if you do that. And as Richard says, involve. I remember doing this at EFJ, and some of the best ideas came not from my technical experts, but from the other team
Yeah.
members from EFJ. So
Yeah.
it really is a matter of
Yeah.
getting everybody involved, but it does help when the leadership is leading the process. And I say that both in terms of government and policy. We have the policies. There is I'm showing my age, but there is a Jamaica standard for 14,000. I'm sure they've improved on it since then, which is the
Mhm.
environmental management standard.
Hmm.
Um, so it's there, and we've put in place the policies, and nobody could ever say Jamaica doesn't have policies and
We didn't see
environmental
that, Richard.
policies.
We didn't see that.
Nicely written. It's what
I
we
do
do
want
that
to
has to be
I
written.
do want to say though, in terms of Jason's question, and I do agree with you how we're building now. I had a conversation with an architect not too long ago, and he was pretty much saying, we're not building for our culture or our climate. You know, all these buildings that we have going up, and you have to have an AC. It's like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
what did we do back in the day when, you know, we never had ACs? You have your veranda, and the building is made in such a way that air flows through the building. No, we're not building in that way. And I mean, I understand it looks all nice and pretty, but at the end of the day, this is something that we need to think about as it relates to, you know, building costs and even the environmental cost of how we're building. That is also
Mm-hmm.
something that we need to look at.
Solid,
Um,
because all of that ties back into our, again, our climate issues and where we're going to be in 20, 50 years from now.
yeah.
You need to get Jason on this forum.
I know.
Jason was here last, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, Jason? Man,
Last
everybody's still talking about Jason and that chat. But all right,
I
so let's
just
jump into, go ahead, Karen.
Just, I was just going to jump in on the point you made. The culture is very interesting, and because of whether good or bad, because of all my environmental work, I've traveled a lot,
mm-hmm.
and to see the Pacific Islanders and how they build and how they design versus how we build and how we design, and more basically how we dress.
Yeah.
My biggest joke with some of my environmental professionals is we will go to an event and Richard Branson did it in not the most respectful way, but we go to an event on climate change in our jackets and ties in the middle of
Yes.
Jamaica,
I remember
inside and
that launch,
outside.
and he took off, was it the Prime Minister's tie? He took off the Prime Minister's tie and jacket.
Right.
Yeah.
So
We're not
it is
dressed in
very
for
cultural.
Yeah,
organized
I mean,
lifestyle.
we have banks that
sorry.
require certain dress codes that are not tropically friendly. We are not by
Yeah.
nature tropically friendly. We are trying to emulate a very temperate culture in terms of how we're building and how we're dressing. So those are little things, very cultural. But again, I think in terms of where we need to go, the discussion on how leadership can be involved. I saw Alison's questions about incentives. I would love to hear Richard's ideas of incentives. We have tried a range, as I said, in terms of financing, which I saw Jason mention as well. We've given the financing, and the most amazing thing to me when I give grant money is the grant is done, and Alison maybe will comment, and then they come back and say, okay, we need to do more. We made great savings, please give us more money to do more, as opposed to we made great savings, I will now invest in this project.
We will now continue the process, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so let us talk about how climate change and COVID will affect business. And I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you see it impacting business going forward? Richard, let's start with you.
Well,
Switch things up.
it is something that, irrespective of the solidity of your sustainability programs and your practices, the post-COVID scenario forces you to go and review everything. From a sustainability perspective, how are you gonna maintain your bottom line and so on. But when look at the tenets of a sustainability program, you're doing more cleaning, more vacuuming, more everything. Your carbon footprint is gonna change. You're out there now every day with more chemicals, spraying everything and sanitizing everything and so on.
Yeah.
There's a health and environmental balance that now has to be struck, and you can't. It's not gonna be business as usual. Okay, we've ramped up sanitizing and we go on. No, sanitizing means we've started using more chemicals. Where are these ending up? Are these going to a treatment plant? Are these going to end up affecting the
actually our waterways
treatment or waterways and that kind of stuff, or the public treatment plant? Are we going to end up with people now having developing issues, health issues, because we're now using more chemicals in the space and that kind of stuff? Energy is going to be impacted. Water is going to be impacted. The amount of waste you have, everybody using and disposable gloves and plastics and so on and so forth.
Right.
You actually now have to go back and look completely at your operation and see where you stand and how you can deliver the safety that is necessary we're using the science behind COVID. Balance your operations and balance your impact on the environment and your sustainability program. So in a nutshell, you are going to have to start again from scratch. Now, typically your sustainability program involves what we call a continuous improvement: plan, do, check, act cycle. you really need to go back to the planning stage, look at all of your new practices, see how they work, implement them, and look at how you're going to now save in the new normal, save the staff, save the communities, because I don't want anybody to get the thing. When I say save, I'm talking money. Money is that
Yeah.
much, right? It's saving the environment, the people, and your organization to be here
Yeah.
10 years from now.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Karen, you want to chip in anything there?
I would quickly add that Richard, as the Plan, Do, Check, Act is, as I mentioned to you, would be the only graphic I would love to show, because it really speaks to
Mm-hmm.
the essence of how environmental management systems that we are trying to design and work through operate. And it really is about, again, starting where you are. And now we are at the point of COVID. And in fact, Shelley's, again, it originally had only COVID, but it also is about the real impact of climate change, as Richard mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a business downtown saying, oh, all our archives are in the basement. And we are talking about sea level rise, and we're talking about all these other issues. So down businesses, we have our businesses and a lot of our government centers
Mm-hmm.
downtown, and we're
Mm-hmm.
not having the discussions of what really is climate change going to do long term, and therefore planning for it. So you don't expect to take out everything in a day, but if you
True.
know in how many years that the sea level is going to be rising, or that the temperatures are going to be warmer, you have the space to plan, and we should be using that space to plan in that way. And I guess the
Um,
Yes.
question of our
go
incentives
ahead.
is important again.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So let us now just jump into sustainability. You know, it's a new word a lot of people are hearing, and they're like, what does this mean exactly? So Richard, I'll leave
You
this
don't want me
section
to
to
go
you to
down that
some
road.
extent. Yeah, man, let's do
I
it. Let's
think
do it.
that, no.
Jump
Okay.
in.
Here is my,
What exactly does sustainability mean?
it means the same thing as global warming. We're going green. Then we decided to move from going green to have climate ready programs or climate change programs. And then we've decided from just focusing on climate change, we're not going to be sustainable. It's the same thing we've been talking about from 1992, the Agenda 21, and the principles therein in that document. It's a commitment to saving the planet and the people thereon.
Yeah.
Growing your business without killing off the people or the planet. And it's as simple as that. We have managed to change the background behind the marker without moving the marker very much. If you understand what I'm saying, the marker being what are we actually doing every day to be more sustainable. We've changed the background. We've called it all kinds of stuff. It is now sustainability.
Yeah.
It's not new. It is not rocket science. It does involve interpretation and understanding. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to you it's as easy as ABC.
Hmm.
But if people are willing and actually committed to a sustainability program, a green program, an environmental management system, whatever you want to call it, help is not that far. Right? Jason asked a
Yeah.
question about what's happening with, or what about building laws and so on and so forth. In a very metaphorical way, if you're going to build or create a program, you do need to have properly designed plans that tell you what you're going to move first, how you're going to set your foundation, how big this building is going to be, how it's going to fund itself, how it's going to use energy, how it's going to use water. And you need to be able to see the end before you move the first teaspoon of dirt.
Yeah.
And if you see the end and it's not looking like what you should be aiming for, then you need to redesign your plans until they meet your climate and sustainability goals. It's the same thing with an actual program in an organization. You need to see where you want to be, what you plan to put in place, and you don't I don't just say you don't move, but you don't stop adjusting and fine tuning until you get to that place where you're doing the best that you can possibly do. and then you try and do better. Hugh
Yeah.
Cresta, if you remember Hugh, God rest his soul,
Yes.
I think 2 years.
Yes.
Hugh, when we used to do work together, Hugh had a thing he used to say. The only time he'll accept from an organization that they have done everything that they can do is when they start recycling the toilet paper. And he's quite right. There is always something else that you can do,
Yeah.
right? Always.
Yeah. So that leads into zero waste, which is another
Really.
phrase that people are talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and we won't address it directly today. But let's talk about what are some of the reasons businesses do not implement sustainable business strategies. What have you heard? Richard, I'll start with you, but Karen, I would like to hear your input on that as well.
What are the reasons they don't implement them?
Yeah.
Typically because they don't understand them. They don't understand the reach. Sometimes it looks like an additional burden. Persons will tell you,
Mm.
I have my job to do, I know you want me to do this other thing,
Oh
which means
yes.
it's not being properly. You have the organization that's saying, listen, I had planned for a 20% margin, a 20% profit. I'm making 25%. So this savings that you're talking about, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't need to
Yeah.
upset the apple cart. You have the scenario where you have companies that literally tell you, we've been doing this for 50 years. We're a 150-year-old company. We don't need to change because we still have customers and we're still going strong.
Mhm.
Um, in many ways, you also have to deal with myopic decision makers. But realistically, I think it comes down to a lack of understanding of what the full extent and involvement of the program would be to your organization.
Yeah.
You do have the element where you will go in and sit on an organization, um, looking at your assessment, or we've gone and done an assessment, and these are the areas you need to focus on. For energy, you need to do these 5 things. It's going to cost you $40 million. From where? Okay, so what next? Okay, we need to bring it to zero waste. Yes, that sounds good. Well, you need to buy this, get rid of that, and so on, and change this part of your operation. That's going to cost you $2-3 million. You're going to need to hire somebody else. Okay, skip that. What next? And when you go through, you find that a lot of companies expect to achieve without doing anything,
Yeah.
without changing their modus operandi. And in many ways, that's just not going to happen.
Okay.
All
Karen.
right.
I think Richard has done most of the major ones. The cost is normally the biggest challenge that people
Mhm.
will say, and then the additional burden. I would say, as I mentioned before, that one, the carrot isn't there, but also the stick isn't there in a lot of cases in the Jamaican scenario. So the
Mm-hmm.
incentives are not there for necessarily going green on one side of things. If somebody brings in, there was a business I think trying to bring in either the light bulbs or the solar, and they had a hard time. You have to put something in place that encourages the companies to do this.
Yeah.
And on the other side, as much as we want it to be voluntary. If they are in some way damaging the environment, somebody there should be consequences. And so far, unfortunately, we want business so badly in Jamaica that the
Yeah.
consequences have been limited in terms of how much there's been action done.
Yeah. The
I've,
enforcement.
I've overheard conversations. You can't do that. That's $1 million fine. Yeah, but we're going to make $10 million. Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm serious, and it's you are right,
That's
Karen.
disturbing.
If the penalty doesn't match or become a deterrent to some of the stuff that people will do, then some of them will just take the hit, because
Yeah.
the benefit down the road is significantly more than the menial penalty that we charge. Some of our laws need to be updated, and it's as simple as that. Now, you are talking about laws, so they're not going to be updated overnight. And I think
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I said the Environment Division and NEPA are not pulling their weight on that. They are actually trying. I'm familiar with a lot of the reviews that they've done and stuff. but it takes time. Some of them just take time.
Yeah. Okay.
And the only thing I would add real quick is there is innovation to be done with that. For example, when you issue a permit, you can put conditions on your permit. And
Yes.
again, it's very hard to put those conditions in place, but a business must follow it. I think in the end, one of the comments I wanted to make was on the role of stewardship, whether it's as a citizen, as an HR manager in a business firm. Somebody had mentioned something about the green team is a separate team doing their thing, and how do you make them part of the bigger organization? So the question of environmental stewardship is still not, another word I really don't like, mainstream. And it's somebody else's problem. It's us as environmental professionals who have to fix the environment and not everybody else.
Not everybody else.
And for example, in a political setting, I think now maybe last election was the first where we had any kind of question of what is the environmental political agenda of each of the parties. And that's something that will have to grow. So if nobody is asking about the environment, nobody has to answer about the environment. And indeed, as Richard says, NEPA is working very hard, and we really probably need to think about the innovative ways that we can put in place some of the stewardship measures that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've been talking a lot about some of the issues that we've been experiencing, or things that you've heard through your experience. And I want to now talk about how is sustainability going to save my business money? And I don't necessarily want to make it seem as if this is all we want to talk about, but at the same time, we want to look at how we can get people to understand the importance, not just from the money side of it, but also from the environmental side. So if you can talk about how can it save me money, but save the environment as well. Karen.
I think that we said some of the basic money saving measures in terms of sorting and using waste management procedures and processes so that you're not throwing out as much, you're minimizing how much waste, therefore the garbage truck needs to come less often, changing the light bulbs, all the things we've heard, therefore it costs less for energy, motion sensitive light, all of those things have been mentioned. I think there's also water savings and how we can use some of the water aspects of it. So I think there are a range. We could talk about savings in terms of fines you may have to pay. As Richard says, unfortunately, that's not the biggest deterrent because those fines are not so big, but that's also one. Having to do an audit when you're ready versus when you're compelled to is something to consider. So there are a range. I'll let Richard give you some of the more specific ones. But just to add that those are the regular ones. If you think about it on the bigger scale, things like maintaining your machines in good order so that they are running at their optimal. It's something that people don't think about as sustainability, but also counts in terms of making sure that you're using your money effectively, which is in the end what we're trying to help the businesses with. This is really about how everybody can operate best in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, let me step off what Karen has just said and take you for 5 seconds into what we actually do with a client. You spoke a while ago, Karen, about, and I'm going to use energy as just an example. Getting a client to an energy efficient position requires, first of all, defining the client operating scenario. Are they a business operation like a bank or an administrative building or a hotel or a manufacturing organization? What internationally is the standard for consumption per square foot or square meter for a facility like that? Show them where they are in relation to that international benchmark, and then speak to them about how they're going to get themselves down to that level. Change the light bulbs. Update the air conditioning units. Karen said it right. you must now look at a proper preventive maintenance program. How often do you update your machines? How often do you clean them, service them, and so on and so forth? That leads also into chemicals management, health and safety, and so on and so forth. But we're focusing on energy here, right? When you bring all your equipment up to speed and you've replaced the inefficient ones that you've had for 40 years with current ones, ACs may now become inverter units and so on and so forth. Those that you can't change, you find more efficient fuels or refrigerants or whatever for them. You then get to the stage of training the staff to make sure that these new things you're doing become the norm, right? And after that, when you've essentially taken through the equipment and the low-hanging fruits, you may actually now go and say, let us look at your building envelope. Do you have windows or areas that are leaking your cold air out? And how we're going to fix those, which now takes your building maintenance team, maybe an architect or a facilities manager in place. And then you're going to say to them, okay, all that is done, sorted. You probably need to look at a facilities management platform that helps you to electronically monitor all of your fans and motors and pumps and so on and so forth, depending on the type of organization. Then you're going to say to them, when all of this is done, we need to look at renewable energy. Does wind work better for you based on your location, or does solar work better for you? Is it a combination of the two, or is there some other scenario that will help you to bring your energy footprint into that where we started internationally acceptable range? If you think about what I just said to you, and that's energy alone, and I have of things. If you think about having that conversation with an organization, it's not a $2 conversation. It is also not a conversation that any organization that's not committed to making that entire journey. It's not a conversation that's going to go very well. So you have that for energy. You have a similar conversation for water, a very similar conversation for waste or zero waste scenarios. And then you go into things like hazardous materials management, and you go into things like air emissions, and so it's not, sustainability and sustainable development programs are not a fly-by-night scenario. They take commitment, they take time, they take expertise. And this is one of the things that when companies do it right, you mentioned, Karen, the issue of the green team over there and the rest of us over here. If your green team is separate from the rest of your operations, you will never get off the ground.
Yeah.
Right? It will forever be a program in progress. Well, no. It will forever be in launch. It will never be in progress. Right? Your green team, depending on your organization, may be one person from every department, if you're like a service organization and so on. Or you may be a department on your own, integrated within all of your other departments. The goal of your green team is communication and feedback. That's it. Their job is to make sure the goal of management, executive decisions on what we're doing with energy, what we're doing with water, what we're doing with chemicals, gets to the people who need to hear it, and they get the feedback from the people to say that, but it's not going to work, It's not right. We need X, Y, and Z. We need this. We need that, and bring that back to management so that changes can be made, so you can actually deliver the change on the ground. Okay. So your green team has to be integrated in the operation, no matter how you take it. The green over there and the rest of us over here thing.
And I mean, it doesn't depend. The green team doesn't depend on the size of the organization. Any organization can have a green team. You have five people in an office.
And we have clients who the green team is the management team of the organization. It's not a separate entity. The green team is, are you a manager? You have a department. You're a member of the green team. End of story. Done.
And just to put a plug for the balance between the environmental professionals and getting the information and the science, and then making it translatable to that green team so that they can make operations of it. It is really a very interactive process. But I definitely want to put the plug for using the professionals for that first stage of really understanding what it is you're looking for.
Yeah. All right. So something I wanted to touch on, and Richard, you kind of touched on it earlier, in terms of the importance of, I guess, marketing what it is that you're doing. but not in a way where it looks as if you're just putting
It's
this
yeah,
information out there to look good,
yeah,
and also the perception of consumers. um
right.
we never really touched on it, but I thought it's important based on the audience that we have here. We do have professionals in our audience, but as consumers, I think it's also important for us to now start looking at entities that are doing what we would want them to do and
Mm-hmm.
helping to preserve our environment. How are we seeing that play out in businesses? Are they talking about what they're doing, or are they more doing things on the back end? Are they reacting also, some more so in the tourism industry? Are they reacting to consumers and visitors who want to see more green strategies being implemented?
I think it's dual. There are some things that if the customer will see it when they come to, let's use the hotel industry as you said. If the customer will see it when they come to the hotel, then the hotel will make an effort to tell you, we are reducing the amount of chemicals we use if you hang up your towel to reuse it. Put your plastics in this bin and your regular waste in that bin. And so they'll highlight the things that are typically visible and as again quasi tangible to the customer. What you'll find is the things that the customer may not be directly involved in, those things will now get onto their social media. We've adopted this school and we've done that beach cleanup
Mm.
and so on and so forth.
More so the corporate social responsibility
The
side.
CSR side of it, exactly.
Okay.
The companies that I'm saying it is no disrespect intended, that have their act completely integrated. Let me use that term. The companies that have their programs integrated will find it much easier to tie their CSR programs and their PR programs into their operations. So all the information, how much waste they've saved from organic farming and how much waste they've saved from proper kitchen practices, reducing cardboard coming into their warehousing and so on. That kind of stuff will come out in environmental reports. Some of them will go for an EarthCheck certification or a Globe certification, some international certification that says I have a badge that shows I am doing something. And this
Yeah.
something, you can always check my website and it will tell you exactly what it is. But then those that have less of an inclination to go for certification, they will focus on their Instagram and Facebook and outreach programs like that. And they'll put it out to the customers. Most hotels and companies that do have a sustainability program that they're committed to, they find a way to get the information out there. They
Okay.
do.
Okay. Do you think it's also important for entities to align their sustainability strategies with the SDGs? Based on Vision 2030 and what the government is putting forward. Healthy environment, industry, they're pushing for. Why are you laughing? Why is he laughing? Tell me, what is happening? What am I missing? And he's sitting up. No, this is very important.
He's ready. He's ready. I'll leave it for.
Go on. Go on.
No, I don't even know what else to say now. I'm waiting for you.
Okay,
Like
come
you
on, let
have
me start.
something
Let me
coming.
start. It is from an international perspective, it is critically important that they align what they're doing with the SDGs. Because everybody else is taking note of and making an effort to understand the SDGs. It does not benefit them to have programs that actually impact the SDGs, but not make that reference.
Okay.
Now, earlier I said to you, going to a hotel manager and saying to them, or a business manager and saying, you need to focus on SDG number 7, energy efficiency and stuff. You're going to get big eyes with saucers asking you, what are you talking about? So that integration, whilst critical, whilst necessary, will require a Karen or other professional to translate the SDGs into functional, implementable, active elements of the operation. You're gonna need somebody who is able to look at the SDGs, what they're individually asking for, and come back to the client and say, okay, all of these things that you're doing in this part of your operation and all of these things you're doing over here actually align SDG number 1
Yeah.
poverty eradication. These things align with SDG number 6, and so on and so forth. Expecting an organization in the middle of what is already typically stringent operations to go and try and figure out SDGs to then tell you what they're doing. Some of the things they don't even pay attention to because this is just how they operate. But
Mm-hmm.
these actually impact and contribute to their achievement of the requirements of the SDGs. You need somebody who is an expert or who has an understanding of these SDGs to go and
Mm-hmm.
tie the operation to the SDGs and give you whether it be a report or an alignment of some sort so that the organization at the head and coming down actually understands how they have been performing with respect to the issues of the issues outlined with the SDGs and where they're missing opportunities.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to quickly mention the idea of who your consumer is. One of the challenges we've had, for example, with selling a green tourism product in Jamaica is what is a tourist looking, what is the typical Jamaican tourist looking for?
Mm-hmm.
If a tourist is going to Costa Rica, I'll call names. Costa
Mm-hmm.
Rica sells Pura Vida, which is about they sell their ecotourism.
Right.
We sell sun, sea, sand, sorry, and all inclusiveness. None
Yeah.
of which is very, by nature, very environmentally sound and friendly.
True.
So some of it is how, and the same goes for whether what we're selling when we're selling a box drink or anything else. We are not selling, by nature, we do not sell the environmentalness of what we do in many of our operations. The one or two that do,
Mm-hmm.
Jason and Solar is doing that, etc. But we really will have to think about the consumer that we are going to try and market to,
Mm-hmm.
COVID-based, environmentally based, and sustainably based, if we were going to look at that. But the typical tourist now is not one who is asking. And we found this out with the Green Globe certification process we mentioned to you earlier. We
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of hotels Green Globe certified, smaller hotels and some of the bigger ones also did it on their own. But in the end, the tourists didn't need that to come. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
therefore, what is the benefit to them and why are we doing it? Are the questions we always will come back to.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Um.
mean, to add to that, what you now have where that is concerned, Karen, is you have your larger, which ties back, Shelley, to something you said much earlier. You now have or the larger tour operators, the TUI and the Royal Caribbean cruise
Mm,
lines, saying to our local entities, if you want us to sell Green Grotto Caves, you must have a sustainability program. You need to have a sustainability certification program in place. And
yeah.
it it hurts as a sustainability professional. It hurts to know that we have all of this value, all of
Yeah,
these things that we can actually do without anybody pushing us. Some of these things come very naturally to us, but we don't move until we're pressured to do it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's right.
It's almost like taking medicine. You're sick, you know you need to take medicine to get better,
Yeah.
but somebody has to come and say, it's 10 o'clock, you should take your medicine because it tastes bad.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're running a little over, but I actually wanted to touch on Allison's comment or question here, and I know we didn't talk about this earlier, when we were doing our one-on-one, but sustainable financing, that might be another topic, but I think it's also important for us to look at the incentives. What are the incentives for us to integrate sustainable business strategies, from government policies, but also, Karen, I guess from a donor sense as well, or from the grants. Is are there any incentives for people to implement these strategies in their implement these sustainable business strategies?
In their operations, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what we're doing. So I would say I think there's two answers to that question. One is yes, there are some, and more of those are being made available to businesses. It was initially very hard for a for-profit entity to receive a grant or to receive support from a donor type organization. So that is happening more often. But just to touch really on the work I do now, which is I help the trust funds, but I also am helping to design sustainable finance mechanisms for the trust funds so that they will always have funding. And for that, we are looking at targeting private sectors to come up with a very simple type of 1 cent per profit or half a cent per profit made dollar to go to something environmental, something substantial for a protected area, for example, or for a marine area or some operation like that. It is in very early stages in our region, I would say, in the world generally, but more specifically in our region. And indeed, most of the private sector entities that we have been talking to have been North America based, etc. But just to say that our neighbors in Latin America have been coming up with some very interesting schemes. There are other schemes. Payments for ecosystem services is its own topic. But the idea that our businesses are using the environment and we find a way to cost and make sure that they understand the cost of the water that they're using and paying for that, not as the water, but for the ecosystem service that they're using is very popular. It's a big topic, and but I would say getting that to a money level where money is coming in has been the harder part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
My 2 cents on that is, as I've said, sustainability is not rocket science. It's not new. And we're not the only ones in the world trying to implement sustainability programs. The British, the Germans, the US, you name most companies that have real solid drives towards sustainability. They all have incentives meted out for businesses to get on board. It would be common sense for us, if we can find it, to implement incentive programs to get people started. Because again, if you don't get them started, and if they don't understand what's going on, by having the process implemented within their facility, it's highly unlikely you're going to get them to just randomly jump up and get on board. So having incentives in place, whether it be tax incentives or import incentives or whatever, as Karen said, payment incentive, having some sort of incentive that gives them a reason to move to that first step is always a valuable thing. Have we implemented them enough? I don't know. I really don't know. Karen mentioned earlier, 1998, we had the ECCO program launched in Jamaica. The Green Globe standard was launched in Jamaica. We went through it's now an international standard, competing with and replaced by many others. But it was launched in Jamaica. We had 20 plus hotels that went through the process here, and that was paid for by USAID, and it ran for 5 years. And many of the hotels, when the funding dried up, they stopped. Many of the hotels have maintained and transitioned to other standards and have grown into, whether or not they're certified, or the thoughts are they've grown into the position where, whether or not they're pursuing certification, they now have operating mantras that say, we don't burn anything, we reduce waste, we don't use plastic. Mark you, the styrofoam ban also helps a lot with that. But that have maintained a lot of the practices that have come on board. Without the incentives, I suspect strongly you wouldn't have had some of the hotels and some of the companies that are currently green-minded or sustainability-minded. They would just not have started. So having incentives, always a positive.
Okay. All right. I think. Go ahead, Karen. Let's last comment.
Okay, I'll take it as last comment because it was to think about next steps and some of the things JIP has been thinking about, which is making this, I think, for me, I'm always Caribbean and Jamaican. How do we make it more relevant in those two settings is something that we are trying to figure out. The concept of indices of one type or another comes to mind. The idea of knowing maybe Caribbeanizing, Jamaicanizing something that at
Yeah.
least says this is your environmental ranking is
Yeah.
something we've thought about, and we would love
Mhm.
feedback from your audience as to how what they think about doing that. Would somebody look at whether something is green certified or not, or just a ranking? And the idea
Mhm.
behind the ranking is really to keep it um, as simple as possible, something that anybody can see how we got to the ranking,
Yeah.
replicable,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe something that we can also share in the Caribbean. So thoughts like that have been going through our mind, and as again I say, we would love feedback as JIP continues to figure out how we can play a role.
Well, I think that kind of ties into what I was asking earlier in terms of the marketing about their sustainable business strategies. Because if
Yeah.
there is an index that you can see, well, this company is doing, X amount, and they're making a difference, they're impacting the environment positively, or they have reduced their emissions or their waste by X amount of, percent. I personally think that consumers will be interested in not just investing, but also buying from specific companies once we have this information. Because why would I purchase from another entity that is dumping their waste in rivers, or doing the wrong practices? And Richard, stop that.
No, but
You know,
I
you
know
know
you
the
have that
answer to that
confidence in the
already.
consumer. No, but
No, I
Shelley, we
thought
have
that
a
I
hard
thought my
time.
facial expressions were off the mark, but Richard, boy,
No, but you know the answer to that already.
I
It's
know,
going
but
to
we
be,
need to get
it's
our
going to be,
consumers involved, and they need to understand that we can't be supporting these entities that are dumping and doing the wrong things. We can't, but we need
right.
the information.
No,
And the index,
I'm
Karen, my
100%
answer
with you
is
on that.
go. We need this index.
Karen, I'm on board with that. Even if you haven't figured it out yet, let me know.
Yeah,
I'd love to be part of that conversation.
yeah, me too. Ditto.
Right?
All right. We are over our time. It was supposed to be 1 hour, but I think we spoke about a lot. We didn't actually touch on every single question that we had outlined, but I think for the most part, we have quite a few tips and you know, suggestions for companies to go green and integrate sustainable business strategies. What
Mhm.
I'll ask now, pretty much, Richard and Karen, if you can give your, I guess, final suggestions or final recommendations in terms of what you think businesses can start with, maybe the top three or top five things that they can start with internally, regardless of the size of the organization. Richard, I'll start with you.
Sure. The first thing they would need to do is take an assessment of whether they want to call it an audit or an assessment or whatever. You can't fix what you don't know or what you can't manage. The
Mm,
first thing is to go online. I audit of any of these platforms. There are a number of different sustainability audits and checklists that you can use. 2 page, 4 page, 10 page checklists that you can use to determine where you sit with energy management, water, and the tenets of what sustainability would impact for your organization. Shelley, we were talking yesterday, and as I said to you, what a hotel will look at, what a manufacturing plant, a food manufacturing plant versus a bauxite manufacturing plant will look at are completely different. The focus is going to be different for each type of organization. So the first thing is to go in, have an assessment of what it is you're doing, where you are, and what that assessment will tell you where you need to focus. Is it energy? Is it water? Is it waste? Is it chemicals? Is it none of those, but maybe you need to focus on bringing up your awareness of your staff? Is
yeah.
it your disaster risk management plan? Get an assessment done. It's the first thing. That assessment will help you to prioritize everything else that you need to focus on, certainly for the first year to 2 years. If you can do that, I'm giving you 1 point. That's it. If you can do that, you'll be 10 steps ahead of just
Yeah.
randomly going, let me change the light bulbs, or, a company down the road did a retrofit of their water tanks. Let me do the same thing. No. Get an assessment done so you actually know where you're starting. Are you at the
Mhm.
starting line? Are you still back in the changing room? Are you halfway down the track? Figure out where you are before you start putting effort and money and anything else into a program. That's
Okay.
my 2 cents.
Okay. Karen?
I would say two things just to follow directly on from Richard is use the professionals. We are JIT is totally voluntary, but send us an email and we will give you as much advice as we can.
Yeah.
And help you with directing. As I mentioned, Richard is a member, so we now have a nice group of people who comment on a range of things. So we will try our best to help you. We welcome the questions. The other comment I would have is it's not a rush. And I think Richard said this before, but it's worth emphasizing. Be honest with where you're starting, be honest with where you want to go, and take it step by step, and don't be less worried about the cost and more worried about the results that you're aiming for. And I think you will see that there are things that can be done and places you can start.
Let me tell you one
great.
thing. When we started putting not calling the clients names, most of our clients, and I mean 90+% of our clients, hit 25 to 30% financial savings without spending a dollar. It is simply a matter of engaging the staff, telling them turn off the lights, turn off the water, don't do this, don't do that. The mindset change saves a lot more and generates a lot more benefit than the cost scenario. By the time you get to spending money, you should already have a team of people who understand what you're trying to do. And at that point, or on that point, to get to a stage where you're it's back to what Karen said. Find the professionals. Don't wing it. It's not going to work. Get somebody who actually understands what needs to be done. Have the conversation. Have the one-on-one. Let them guide you. Right? It will save you tons of headaches, mountains of heartache. All right.
And we mentioned JIT, but there is also NEPA. There is also the public sector. They are there, and I'm sure they're interested in playing a role as well.
There you go.
Actually, I have one last question for you. We actually, I completely forgot, and I really need to apologize to the persons that registered. But we did ask those persons that registered, give us some questions if there's anything that they would want us to ask. So this came in. Tips for green and fast-moving consumer goods business. What would you say should be the top 3 ways they should be looking at creating a sustainable business? And I think we touched on most of it, but Richard, 3. 1, 2, 3. Energy, waste.
Energy, waste, and water are always the 3 starting. Those are the low-hanging fruit. They're the visible things. They're the things that you can tell when you've left a light on. You can tell when water is dripping. You can see how many times the garbage truck has to move your stuff. It's also, on a serious note now, it is also, we use those as your primary steps because when you're getting people into a new mindset, it's best when they can see what the change is. They can physically feel what the change is. They can be a part of it. So energy, water, waste are typically the areas that we begin with, right? Along with the awareness that comes with all of that, the training and the one-on-one conversations and so on.
All right. Dana actually was asking, but Dana, I'll touch base with you after the fact because it goes back to the culture. In terms of her walking around, having to turn off whereas everybody else is there.
Sculpt an energy hog, a really ugly looking hog or an energy dopey, and let the guys know that the owner of the hog is the person who is the least contributory to the goals of the company, and walk around and you find a light on, leave the hog in that office or on that desk. Make a note. We have a whiteboard. The hog for Tuesday was John. The hog for Wednesday was Marie, and so on and so forth. It's visibility. It's light, humor, and a wake up. It's not meant for embarrassment. Do not do it for embarrassment. But it's a wake up call to the number of times you've had to turn off the light. It's a wake up call to the number of times you've had to close the window while the AC is on. That kind of stuff. When it becomes visible that, okay, my goodness, look at the whiteboard. It has two columns, three columns of names and things you've had to turn off. It'll be a lot easier to have the conversation. You can easily say to them, guys, look, how many times am I going to talk to you about this? We've done this now. We have 16 names on the list, or 16 times that I've had to make a note here. Kind of
Another thing that we can do is actually incentivize. Then I look and see if you can. And again, I'll reach out to you after this, but you could
Yeah.
probably even create a program where you're incentivizing people to do the right thing, and maybe at the end of the month, whoever has the most points, them get a free lunch or something. So that's something that you could also create. That the last company I was with, when you ask people to bring in plastic bottles, and we said they didn't even know what they were winning, but they truckloads of bottles came because nobody wanted to lose. I mean, we set up one day every other week, and we're just like, bring your bottles on a day, and literally vans upon vans, the company van too. I did not ask them to use the company van, but they decided they were going to reach out because they're partners and they're on the same team. But I mean, again, it goes back to incentivizing people to do the right thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
Dana, that's something that we can touch on. Right?
Actually, her question, SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. They're, without going into it, UN based, and a lot more is online. Feel free to Google it. The other comment I had was, my experience has been that involving the finance department is something that's easy enough to do, because they're paying the bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are paying the bills, and they know how much the electricity is costing, and they may even, in a beginning scenario, you could ask them, if I turned off so many lights, what would the difference be? And that's something you need to be able to carry to your management team. So I wanted to make sure to mention that they are normally very enthusiastic, because, as I said, they see it, they pay the bills, and they know what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was asking Richard, in terms of the checklist or audit, where can we find that document? Is that something you want to share via email or what?
Yeah, I can respond to that via email, but typically, Amoy, depending on your industry, you can get good checklists, preliminary checklists, to give you an idea of where you are by simply Googling sustainability checklist for office or energy checklist for whatever it is you have. I would say to you though, once you've gone through and done your preliminary checks and balances and realizing of where you are, it's good to reach out to a JIEP or somebody else who can now tell you how to take the first step
Yeah.
after you've done that.
Or a Shelley.
All right, Richard.
Okay.
Pass it around.
Yeah.
I love this.
All right, guys. So I think that's all we have for questions today. Richard
Mhm.
and Karen, thank you so much. I think we had too much fun. I feel like we need to do this
No,
next week again.
I think the fun makes this sustainable. We'll be here next month.
Exactly.
End of the month, August
End of the
26th,
month.
we'll be here again. All right, so thank you. I am actually going to ask you to wait in the waiting room, and I'll be back.
All right. No.
All right, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed it today. I am actually hoping that everyone that was here learned something, and you guys will now be able to implement something in your company. Again, it depends. The size of the entity really doesn't matter. You know, if you have 5 people working for you, 3 people working for you, there are changes and steps that you can make to integrate sustainable business strategies in your entity. All right. So thank you so much for participating and joining us for the launch of Green Your Biz. The first launch was in 2011, and this is now the web series and the start of Shelley's consultancy as it relates to reaching out to entities to create sustainable business strategies. So I want to thank you all for being here. We hope to see you for the next episode, which will be August 26th. Remember, every last Wednesday. I will ask you if you could sign up, register at www.liveecco.com/GYB, and you will be able to get information on the various topics ahead of time and the tips, you can also reach out to us as individuals and reach out to our network. So that is also another reason why we suggest that you sign up. Going forward, actually, we will be closing this group because we want it to be very focused. We want to ensure that the persons that are in the group are very interested and are actually making changes, because we want to then help you make these changes as we go along. All right. So if you can register, www.liveecco.com/GYB. I just want to leave you with a note. Please be reminded that an inclusive and green recovery is integral if we are to create more resilient economies and a world in which business can thrive, not just now, but for future generations. For businesses, building back better is about much more than corporate social responsibility. It is about truly aligning our strategies with the natural, social, and economic systems on which we depend. Despite the tragedy, the pandemic, we must make sure that it becomes the catalyst for a profoundly positive transformation of the local and global economies, taking us closer to a world in which everyone can live well within planetary boundaries. Again, thank you, and I do hope to see you August 26th.